Some friends were having a sleepover one night when they decided to try to hold a seance. One of them, Clara, recently lost her grandpa and wanted to see if she could commune with the spirit. They gathered some candles and a few items that belonged to her grandpa, his watch, his cigar case, and photograph of him. They held hands and started the seance. Suddenly, the candles began to flicker, and hands on the watch began to spin. Clara was sure it was her grandpa. Elated, she began to talk to him and ask him questions. One of the candles flew, as if by some invisible force, and almost hit her head. "Grandpa would never do that," she said. She was right. It wasn't her grandpa, and whomever it was didn't like to being disturbed. That's why you should always be careful when summoning spirits or using a Ouija board. One night, some people was having a party. There was 6 of them, and they had all just taken their seats when they heard an unexpected knock at the door. The woman hosting the party opened the door to see who it could be, but no one was there. Somebody must have realized they hit the wrong address, she explained. But they all turned attention back to the table. There was a 7th plate. "Was there before?" one of the men asked. "I must have said an extra place. I'm sorry about it," she replied. She took it back to the kitchen, but when she returned, another plate was there, this time with a glass next to it. At this point, they figured the best way was to play along. They filled the empty glass and plate so as not to upset their mysterious uninvited guest. It was 9 o'clock. Time for the store to close. Sarah, Ginny, and Kelly were the only ones working. As they were cleaning up the store, a pile of shirts fell to the floor. None of them had touched them. "Very funny," Kelly said. "No, really?" Sarah replied. "He's a little boy. He likes to play." Kelly didn't take them serious though. She thought they were teasing her because she was younger. She went into the back room to get her keys to go home. She saw a flash of a young boy in the mirror next to her. When she looked back, her keys had been placed on the floor. The carnival came to town every summer, and this year was no different. But Charlie had just started working there, so he didn't know what the rest of the workers knew about the Ferris wheel. He was in charge of operating. The first night of the carnival was bustling with people, but as it came time to close, it was practically a ghost house. However, there was one boy who showed up at the last minute. "One for Ferris wheel," the boy said, giving Charlie a ticket. He looked around. "Where are your parents?" he asked the little boy. The boy just took his seat and didn't answer. Unsure of what to do, he let the boy go on the ride. But when the ride was over, the boy was no longer in his seat. He ran to his boss to tell him the story. The boss said, "Oh my God, I know him. Let me give you something." On the newspaper, it had the boy's picture and the headline, "Boy falls from Ferris wheel, 8 years old." After we moved into our home, we were told the woman had died there at the hands of her abusive husband. She hated men. My dad would wake up with scratches all over himself, and whenever my brother was mean to my sister, he would have scratches on him as well. One day, my brother hurt my sister. He hit with something. When he woke up later, he had a horrible bloody nose. The day we moved out, my brother accidentally broke his twin's arm, throwing up a wrestling move. He swears that he would have died if it wasn't our last time in this house. I was standing in my parents' room, talking to my very sick dad at the time. He was dying of cancer. I got the feeling something was behind me. I looked towards the doorway to the living room, and something about 4'6" and fully black is peeking around the corner with its hands on the door frame. I ran towards it, and it slipped back around the door. When I got outside the doorway, there was nothing. My dad was completely confused when I stepped back inside the room, and I tell him. People who stayed at my house in my dad's final days claim to have seen it. My mom saw the figure on multiple occasions in multiple places until he passed away. We haven't seen it since. After my parents divorced, when I was a teenager, I lived with my mother. I experienced lots of paranormal happenings. Several times, when I was reading in my bed, it would feel as if somebody that hated me was staring at me. When I got the feeling, I would leave the room and come back an hour later. Sometimes during the day, I would see a shadow figure sneaking along my bedroom walls. Something in the flat was pretending to my dog. I went into my room and I heard a deep growl from under the bed. My dog wasn't capable of making a noise that deep. It sounded like either a really big dog or a man doing his best dog impersonation. Other times, my dog would piss in the room next to mine, but wouldn't come when I called, as if he was afraid of something in the hallway. When I moved in, the paranormal activity stopped. 2 sisters were at home alone. They stayed up late, talking and telling stories. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the sound of loud music. They looked at each other, confused, and unsure of where the music could be coming from. The older sister got out of the bed and began walking down the hallway. It sounded like the music was coming from their parents' room. She entered into the dark room, saw her father's laptop open, saw music playing, and right then, the music stopped, scared, and ran back to her room, where her young sister was waiting on the bed. Frightened, she shut the bedroom door behind her and got back under the covers. They heard slow, heavy footsteps, one after another, 2 hard knocks on the bedroom door, but they couldn't leave the room for the rest of the night. 2 young men in their 20s, Josh and Dan, went on a camping trip together in the desert in New Mexico. They didn't take much with them besides sleeping bags, food, and materials for a fire. After they cooked dinner, they fell asleep as they gazed up into the starry night sky. The beauty and peace of the trip were short-lived. It sounded unnatural, a perfect repetition. Josh took his steps forward, and then someone grabbed him from behind. He turned around to see Dan with his finger in front of his mouth, warning Josh to keep quiet. They still don't know who or what was trying to lure Josh away into the desert. Sam, Peter, and John met up every day after work. This time, they decided to try some place they had never been there. They say this place is haunted. Peter told his friends of the bar they'd chosen that night. The other 2 insisted that was nonsense, and they all sat down in a booth. They were about to make their usual toast when both Sam and John's glasses completely shattered. "What gives?" they yelled. "I'm sorry about it. That happens sometimes," the waiter said. My grandfather told me this story about how one time he was sitting in a chair in front of the house when he heard his wife repeatedly calling him from inside the house. The thing is, my grandmother passed away a few years before that, but he told me the voice was so pressing that he actually got up to look inside the house, and as soon as he got inside, he heard a loud crash behind him and turned around to see the chair he has been sitting in moments ago had been crushed by the cast iron gutter that fell on it. If he hadn't come inside the house, he would have probably been seriously injured. I don't know if it's paranormal or not, but every time I think about it, it sends chills down my spine. One day, my new wife and I were having an argument. I can even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and living room on one side, then a bathroom with 2 entrances. On the other side of the bathroom was a hallway that had windows in one side, and 2 bedrooms on the other. From my bedroom, I could look across the hall into the bathroom, then through the bathroom and down the other hall. I just noticed movement out the corner of my eye. The honest to God, it looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved, like electricity arcing. I remember when I saw it, I wasn't afraid, just like, what the fuck? Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around. It just focused on me, I guess. Then I was scared. I didn't move. I was just frozen, because it just fucking came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me slammed shut on it. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went the fuck outside, into the daylight, and didn't go back until she got home about 10 minutes later. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe I saw something supernatural, but I know I saw something. One freezing night, a man was driving down a road. The snow was picking up and quickly turning into a blizzard. But this man wasn't the only one on the road. There was another man driving behind him. The other man flickered his car lights to signal him to stop. The both men get out of their cars. The second man stretched out his hand and gave the first man a pink scarf. It was soft, like his daughter's. The man who gave him the scarf had a terrible look in his eyes and a terrible smile to match. The father jumped back into his car and sped home, where he found Dad, the police, waiting for him.